In this video, you will learn a recommended order for teaching phonics skills. If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, creator of the Measured Mom Education website, and host of the Triple R Teaching podcast. I'm also currently pursuing my PhD in literacy. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my recommended order for teaching phonics skills in kindergarten, first, and second grade. Then I'll show you where you can get a free printable scope and sequence so you can follow this order for yourself. A phonics scope and sequence tells us what our students need to learn, that's the scope, and in what order to teach those skills, that's the sequence. Research does not tell us what particular phonics scope and sequence we should follow, but in general we know that we want to move from simple to more complex skills. I've organized my scope and sequence into 3 levels, levels 1, 2, and 3, which roughly line up with kindergarten, first, and second grade. However, the skills students are taught in a particular grade really depend on what they're ready to learn. The important thing is that you have a scope and sequence and that you follow it, so nothing is missed. Like most phonics programs, I recommend starting with consonants and short vowels. We don't want all the short vowels to be taught in a row. We want to intersperse them with the consonants, and we want to organize them in a way that very early students can start to read simple 2- and 3-letter words with a short vowel. So the order that I typically follow for the vowels is A, I, O, E, and U. And of course, I'm sprinkling consonants between those vowels. I also like to introduce the basic consonant digraphs pretty early on because it's a pretty simple concept that 2 letters spell one sound. So those early digraphs we want to focus on are CH, SH, TH, WH, and then CK at the end of a word, and then even NG at the end of a word, as in the word sing. After teaching students to read VC and CVC words, so VC is vowel consonant, as in at, and CVC is consonant vowel consonant, as in cat, then I want to move on to teaching students to read words that follow the floss rule. Kids don't have to know the floss rule to read a word that has a double consonant at the end, but it is helpful with spelling. And I do encourage you to align your spelling instruction with the phonics instruction, especially in kindergarten and first grade. With the floss rule, we know that in a single syllable word that ends with f, ul, s, or z, we're typically going to double that final consonant. Next, I'm going to move on to words with consonant blends. Now, there's disagreement in the world of phonics about whether we should call them blends or consonant clusters. What is important to keep in mind is that a blend itself is not a grapheme. So a grapheme is a letter or letters that spell a sound, but a blend, as in FL or TR, is actually 2 graphemes next to each other. We often call them a blend because we say them so quickly it's almost like their sounds are blended together. Some people prefer not to do that. They like to use blend only as a verb, as in blending sounds to make words, and that's totally fine. The important thing to remember is that we want to teach students to read words that follow this pattern, CCVC or CVCC. So we have the initial blends, which could be categorized as L blends, R blends, and S blends, as well as those final blends, and there's many, many of them. We don't want to teach blends as if they're individual pieces of code. We don't want to teach students to memorize the FR says fr and ST is st. Instead, we want to include these blends in words that we're having students practice reading so they learn to blend all those sounds together, because this is more complex than CVC words. In the way that I organize my scope and sequence, the final skill in the level 1 set is simple open syllable words. So for example, the word go is an open syllable because it ends with a vowel that spells its long sound, O. Other words like this include we and hi and so. Now I want to remind you that even in this early stage, students can start to read multi-syllable words. So if they can read CVC words, they can read compound words that combine to CVC words. Examples of those could be bedbug, hot dog, eggshell. Moving on to level 2, we can teach students to read words that combine open and closed syllables. So for example, in the word robot, the first syllable is an open syllable and the second syllable is closed, robot. We can also teach them to read words that have 2 closed syllables, as in the word muffin. Is it important that students can label syllables by type? I would say no. Different programs would disagree on that, but the important thing is that they can read them. So give them practice reading these words with open and closed syllables. Next, I like to teach CVCE words. So a CVCE word is a word that follows the pattern where you have a consonant, a vowel, a consonant, and then an E that makes the long vowel say its name. You can see some examples of those on the screen. CVCE words have different names. Some people call them magic E or silent E. I'm not a big fan of calling them silent E words because there are many reasons for silent E at the end of a word. And we want to focus here on the words where that final E is making that vowel say its name. Again, don't forget about those longer words. If students can read CVCE words, they can also read words like handmade, classmate, timeline. After CVCE words, I like to teach students to read words with vowel teams. And there are many different vowel teams. They might be 2 letters as in EE or EA. They might be 3 letters as in IGH. There's disagreement about whether EIGH is actually a grapheme, but we're going to call it that for the sake of this video. EIGH spells A as in how much does something weigh. Again, as I keep saying, we want to sprinkle in those longer words. So if students know long vowel teams, they can read words like hayseed, raindrop, firewood. We move on now to R-controlled vowels, and sometimes people switch R-controlled vowels. They put it earlier in the scope and sequence. Perfectly fine. The important thing is, again, that you have a scope and sequence and that you follow it. So with R-controlled vowels, we have different ways to spell the sound. The most common are IR and ER and UR. And then we also have OR, typically spelled OR, and we have R, typically spelled AR. There's different names for R-controlled vowels. Some people call them R-influenced vowels or bossy R. The point is that the R changes the sound of the vowel that precedes it. Some longer words that feature R-controlled vowels would be barnyard, western, or mutter. Let's move on now to diphthongs and complex vowels. A diphthong is when your mouth changes shape when saying a single vowel sound. So one example would be the sound oi. You can see that my lips go out and then they're wide. So oi, but it's counted as one vowel sound, oi. And we can spell that O-Y or O-Y. We also have the diphthong ow, as in O-U or O-W. And then I typically include the aw sound, although it's probably not technically a diphthong. You might call it a complex vowel. So aw as in sauce or lawn. Finally, I like to focus on consonant LE words as in bundle, wrinkle, puzzle. For each of those words, the final syllable is a consonant plus LE. With this pattern, we're already working with multisyllable words. Let's go ahead and review the basic scope and sequence for teaching phonics skills. We have VC and CVCE words as we're teaching those consonants and short vowels. Mixed in with those consonants towards the end are basic consonant digraphs, both initial and final. Then we're going to focus on the floss rule and then blends. So initial blends and final blends, sometimes called consonant clusters. After that, I teach open syllables. Then we move on to CVCE words, long vowel teams, R-controlled vowels, diphthongs, and consonant LE. Now there's a lot more to this. You might be asking, well, what about the ED ending? What about the ING ending? What about some of those less common digraphs? I recommend downloading my free phonics scope and sequence, which you can find below this video. That will give you all the skills I've mentioned in this video, plus more in a recommended order. And guess what? I have free decodable books on my website that follow the scope and sequence. You can find the link to those as well. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.